Great. Okay.
Go.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Nancy Coulter-Parker, content strategist with Informa Health and Nutrition and Natural Products Insider, your host and moderator today. Thank you for taking the time to join us today for our webinar, Getting Your CBD Brand Ready for Regulation, brought to you by Caliper Ingredients and Natural Products Insider. Caliper Ingredients develops, manufactures, and distributes Caliper CBD, a proprietary suite of standardized, clean label, shelf-stable formulations of water-soluble hemp-derived cannabinoids, including CBD. Caliper CBD is produced according to standard commercial food manufacturing processes and is designed for scalable manufacturing, blending effectively into multiple product applications, including food and beverage. Joining us today is Justin Singer, CEO and co-founder, Caliper Foods, parent company to Caliper Ingredients. Before we begin, a few words about this webinar technology. This platform allows you to watch this event the way you want to watch it. Feel free to customize your webcast console. You can move windows around by dragging on the title bar or resize your windows by clicking on the lower right corner of any window. On the right-hand side, you'll see where you can enter your Q&As, and our webinar today will include a live Q&A at the end. You can submit questions at any time during the presentation within the console. We'll respond to these at the end of the presentation. If we don't get to your specific question, we'll make every effort to respond via email later on. Technical webinar questions will be answered to you directly during the presentation. You can download the presentation slides from today by clicking on the folder icon on your screen. You can do this during the webinar. It won't interrupt the presentation. And this entire presentation will be saved for on-demand viewing for 365 days. So again, please submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will field them at the end. So when the Farm Bill of 2018 removed hemp from the illegal substances list, I think many of us thought this would have a faster path to the FDA putting regulatory parameters in place around the sales of CBD products. But when it comes to regulating CBD, the FDA has prioritized pharmaceutical monopoly over public health, leaving the consuming public and honest brands to fend for themselves. And with its recent rejection of full-spectrum new dietary ingredient notifications, the agency has only pushed its head further into the sand. In today's webinar, we're happy to have Justin Singer, CEO and co-founder of Caliper Foods, join us to share how we got here and what's next for a category that's waiting and still waiting for a responsible unlock. Now, a little bit more about Justin. Justin Singer is CEO and co-founder of Caliper Foods, parent company to Caliper Ingredients. Prior to founding Caliper, Justin spent 4 years teaching innovation theory and high-growth entrepreneurship at the School of Engineering at Columbia University. He began his career as an investor with IA Ventures, a seed-stage venture capital firm in New York City. And Justin holds an MBA in finance from Columbia Business School, a JD in telecommunications law from Columbia Law School, and a Bachelor of Business Administration and Operations Management from the University of Michigan Ross School of Business. So I think we're in good hands with him today. So again, please remember to submit your questions at any time during the presentation, and we will field those after the presentation is complete. With that, let's get started. Over to you, Justin.
Thanks so much, Nancy. I appreciate it completely. So yeah, welcome everybody to the presentation of Getting Ready for Regulation, how to think about the cannabinoid category in the twilight, hopefully the twilight of FDA purgatory. Today, some housekeeping items before we get too deep in. First, ask questions. Please use the chat feature. We've also got Keith Wolfel, our head of R&D here, and Jillian Jacobs, the head of our ingredients division at Caliper Foods, overall Caliper Foods as well. So we've got a good group ready to answer anything you might have, and we expect that to be a big part of this. And then again, the presentation is being recorded. And we welcome the opportunity to speak with you directly. You can email us, and we'd be glad to put together a discussion specific to your brand's needs. Today's lesson plan, and please enjoy the dog bullet points. There are fun things about converting from PowerPoint. Who is Caliper? Overview of FDA cannabis and cannabinoids. Where do we go from here? And then Q&A. Pretty straightforward. You've already heard my bio. My grandmother is very proud. Thank you for your time. Some previous stuff. If you are interested in any of our previous webinars that we have done or presentations, there will be links linked in the PDFs that will go out following this presentation. Please go ahead and go through them. We encourage it. We really like educated customers. So who is Caliper? Well, we're a food and supplements company, and we specialize in cannabinoids. We are not a cannabis company playing in foods and supplements. What does that actually mean? Well, it starts with our people. You look at our ingredients team. Jolene Jacobs, who's sitting with me, is the GM of Caliper Foods, came to us from Evolve Biosystems, Luprino Nutrition, and Mead Johnson. Keith Wolfel, who's also sitting here, spent the first 25 years of his career with M&M Mars and their health and nutrition venture groups. Our VP of Manufacturing, Quality, and R&D came to us from White Wave Danone, where he was running pilot plant operations. And before that, he had been the general manager of Medallion Labs, while also running all sorts of R&D and quality manufacturing operational roles in leadership at Pillsbury and General Mills. Food safety, Victor Zessiger from Eurofins, and then R&D, lots of people who have come up in traditional food and are now taking that to cannabinoids. And I think this goes to show how we think about cannabinoids. We believe cannabinoids are a new category of functional ingredient. They deserve to be thought of just like probiotics. They are safe, they vary with a very positive toxicity profile. They're also bioactive. They are the opportunity. So we thought if you're going to think of them as functional ingredients, you better bring people around the table who understand functional ingredients. And that's what we've done. Now, once you get the right people around the table, what do you do with them? Well, you do things right from the start. So, as I said, we're a CPG company specialized in cannabinoids. We do R&D around that, and I'll get into our clinical research agenda in a second. We also focus on process and manufacturing. Our production processes and the production infrastructure associated with cannabinoids had to be developed from scratch. A couple years ago, when everyone got hot to trot about the industry, I think there was an assumption that you could treat this just like traditional CPG and go to your co-man and say, hey, throw that, can you source some sugar, source some CBD and throw it in my product for me? That doesn't work. Everybody's got to remember that sugar didn't become a commodity ingredient without decades of investment and work. We're trying to cram 40 years of supply chain development into 5 years right now. It is hard work. So everything that we do is about adherence to specification and consistency at scale. That's how you get quality. And speaking of quality assurance, we build robust sourcing standards that span the raw material supply chain, and our QA program is built to ensure quantifiable consistency from extraction to finished product. I think in cannabinoids, cannabis, hemp, all of it, everyone likes to talk about we've got the best stuff. Nobody wants to define what best means. To us, best is the absence of variance. We look for things that we can hit time and time again. And then analytical methods. Can't really know what you're doing if you can't measure it. We've developed testing methods that have been adopted as standard practice by some of the highest volume cannabis labs in the country. We've submitted standards for AOAC around analytical. We have bulletproofed discovered errors in state testing methods that have led to inconsistent results. You can only get what you measure, so it's pretty important to have that lab. Finally, customer support. We support the full development life cycle from concept to validation with food scientists, manufacturing specialists, and quality systems. It's stage gated, it is careful, it is consistent, it is intentional, and it looks for problems before you put your products out into market. So what it means to us to be built for regulation, it's about doing things right, even when no one is paying attention or giving credit. Our products and infrastructure are designed to meet the needs of compliant brands and retailers out of the box. Unlike many competitors, we don't take process, formulation, or analytical shortcuts. We don't lie about our C of A's. We don't not declare emulsifiers in our packages. We don't put out products that don't meet their label claims. That is hard. It hurts. Sometimes we take tests on it, but that is what it means to operate in a regulated food market. You do things right or you don't do them at all. We recognize that cannabinoids are novel ingredients requiring extensive R&D to commercialize. Unlike competitors, we don't claim anything we haven't verified. It's easy to just say, well, this should be like this. You've got to verify it. Our expertise in process and production engineering, as well as food and emulsion science, contributed to industry-leading platform that enables rapid scaling without undue risk. Unlike competitors, we don't believe in fake it till you make it. We make it and then we talk about it. We know how to work with scaling brands because we've worked with scaling brands. Whether it's General Mills, Danone, Starbucks, Mars Wrigley, we know what it means to develop and launch a product right. Our products are compliance ready. That means they meet their specs and they are substantiated. And let's talk about substantiation because it matters and we invest accordingly. You should not believe what anybody says in cannabis or hemp. You should only believe what is proven. Our clinical approach focuses on pharmacokinetics rather than pharmacodynamics. The FDA has made it clear that they have no interest in entertaining pharmacodynamic discussions with consumer product companies. Why even bother? We also work with credible university partners on our research. It's important to us that the people we work with would publish whether our products are best or not. This is fundamental research. So publication independence, having that is essential to instilling trust in the marketplace. We also publish results in peer-reviewed open access journals. Again, don't believe what we say, believe what you see, what we can prove. We also develop desirable marketable claims with FTC-grade substantiation. At some point, things will turn on, and when that happens, you don't want to go back to the drawing board to reformulate because you weren't labeling accurately, just because nobody was checking. You want to do it right. So what research have we published? Well, we published some of the only research that we're aware of on commercially available CBD products. First, a scoping study in the Journal of Phytotherapy Research, along with from researchers from Colorado State University, and again, in the Journal of Pharmaceuticals, which was a crossover randomized study covering all of our consumer and ingredient products, as well as market-leading formats like tinctures and isolates, CBD isolates. These demonstrate significant bioavailability advantage. It also revealed that simply being water-soluble is not a proxy for much of anything. Same goes with nano. These are complex things. You've got to do the research to make the claim. We have also done the only research that we are aware of with THC consumer products that are actually available in state legal markets. Everybody on this call is probably familiar with how the FDA restricts and the DEA restrict the investigation of THC and other federally illegal products. Great. It makes the world harder. We worked with CSU and the team there to work around that and actually test products that consumers purchase. And let it be known, people are lying. We also have in-flight research. We have an additional PK study on CBD ingestibles focusing on food and capsule formats that's upcoming. We also are working on topical explorations. We'd like to know, does CBD actually penetrate the skin? If it doesn't, then you shouldn't really bother making a muscle claim. If it stays on top of the skin, you should probably look at skin claims. We also have prospective research in the pipeline. So looking at everything from sleep to alcohol to glucose in the gut microbiota, autism, and more on THC ingestibles. This is all essential research, and honestly, we'd rather the FDA did this. It's all in the name of public health and consumer safety, and it's ridiculous to wait on private industry to do these things, especially when you're throwing up barriers all over the place. So what have we learned? Fat soluble doesn't work. No CBD in the blood means no effect to experience. Tinctures and isolates do not deliver CBD into the bloodstream in any period that a consumer would recognize as coming from that product. In the first 30 minutes, you're getting nothing. These numbers say that Caliper liquid gum arabic base is 232x better than CBD isolate. Honestly, the correct answer is infinitely better than CBD isolate. You just need a denominator. Pharmacokinetic research lays the groundwork for effects claims, but there's no point in studying effects until you understand presence. That is why we do pharmacokinetics. What is present in the blood from the product? And here's our shameless plug. Thank you for playing. Products plus substantiation. We've got great products in the ingredient side. They're easy to integrate, and they are all substantiated with clinical research, published clinical research that attaches to them. You like that, being able to say that your product is fast? Congratulations. We have done human pharmacokinetic research that comes with the ingredient products we sell, and you can feel comfortable making those claims in a regulated context. And now to the real parts, the FDA, cannabis, and cannabinoids. So let's start from the beginning here and review the agency, because I think it's important to understand how we got to the morass that we're in. So in the 1906, the Pure Food and Drug Act was passed. This was the first significant federal consumer protection law enacted by Congress. It led to the creation of FDA. It defined what we mean by misbranding and adulteration, and it required that ingredients, including drugs, be accurately labeled with contents and dosage. Novel ideas that we have totally forgotten about. In 1938, the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act passed. This replaced the Pure Food and Drug Act to oversee the safety of foods, drugs, medical devices, and cosmetics, and it replaced the pre-market approval and required pre-market approval for before marketing drugs. It also required FDA to set safe tolerances for unavoidable poisonous substances and authorize standards of identity, quality, and fill. Also a missing inspection regime. Now, this might seem out of place, but it's going to come up later, so it's important to understand. In 1986, FDA approved THC as a prescription drug. Marinol is a commercial form of THC and is approved for use for the treatment of HIV/AIDS-induced anorexia. Congratulations. Keep that in mind, because we're going to come back to that. In 1992, the Prescription Drug User Fee Act was passed, and this is the root of most of the problems that we face today. It authorized the collection of prescription drug user fees and the use of that revenue to fund review activities within FDA. It also connected prescription drug fees to performance goals for the agency and required the agency to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies on those goals and have them approved by Congress. You'll never guess what happened next. And if you can, I'll tell you. In 1994, another piece of landmark legislation, the Dietary Supplement and Health and Education Act, DSHEA, an amendment to the FDCA, codified the definition of dietary supplement and classified it as food. It also provided labeling guidance and a regulatory framework. It also established the drug exclusion rule, which restricts FDA from regulating as foods substances that had previously been investigated as new drugs. God, if only we could predict what would happen next. In 2014, the Agricultural Act of 2014, the 2014 Farm Bill. This is where we create an agricultural pilot program. This is out of the USDA for the cultivation of industrial hemp, defined as cannabis sativa with the THC concentration below 0.3%. It launched the CBD-rich hemp industry as an agricultural product, an agricultural market. Then, in 2018, in June, the FDA approved CBD as a prescription drug under the trade name of Epidiolex. You're all very familiar with Epidiolex, I'm sure, if you're on this call. I think it's interesting to note that this was approved under the Orphan Drug Act, which was meant for small patient populations and relatively small returns. And in return, though, this turned out to be a blockbuster and continues to be one for Epidiolex as the only federally regulated source of CBD, now charging patients $25,000 a year for products that with a total cost of probably less than $500. In December 2018, the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, aka the 2018 Farm Bill, was passed. That removed hemp and its derivative cannabinoids from the definition of marijuana and approved hemp and hemp products for sale in interstate commerce. It also, for reasons surpassing understanding, preserved FDA's authority over hemp products without actually requiring them to regulate them. So we legalized the production of CBD, but not the marketing or consumption of it. What could go wrong? In December 2018, and exactly at the same time as the Farm Bill was signed, the FDA released a statement saying that the proliferation of products containing cannabis are coming, and the FDA has to advance new steps to define their obligations. And where we believe consumers being put at risk, the FDA will warn and take enforcement actions. Great. In July 2019, FDA tried to re-up this, saying they're committed to sound science-based policy. The agency is committed to evaluating the regulatory frameworks for non-drug uses, including products marketed as foods and dietary supplements. Sure you are. In 2020, the FDA chief actually acknowledged reality for the first time. This was very unusual for the agency. Director Hahn said, "We are not going to be able to say that you can't use these products. It's a fool's game to try to even approach that." Yes, we agree. But we want to get them information to help them make the right decisions. How's that go? In July 21, the Consumer Brands Association released a report noting that CBD is unregulated and exploding. It is a patchwork of inconsistent and contradictory state regulations coupled with a lack of methodical testing and safety requirements, and basically destroying the concept of consumer protection. It's allowing bad actors to emerge and keeping trusted brands who care about compliance out of the market. And then last month, the FDA did something even stupider. They published a rejection for full spectrum hemp extract. Now, reasons cited included prior drug exclusion for Epidiolex, targeted levels of CBD in finished product, shades of Pharmanex, an adequate history of safe use. Real world use insufficient. To be clear, I actually think that legally this decision was correct. I don't think full spectrum is any different from isolate, any more than fruit salad that contains blueberries does not have blueberries. These are parts of the greater whole. And since they are targeted amounts, the FDA was right within the confines of the law to actually say that this should be rejected. That said, I'm going to get to many different ways which the FDA could have approached this problem, but chose not to. And then here's a breaking news drop-in from yesterday. The FDA warned consumers about Delta-8 THC, which, for those who aren't aware, is now available for sale publicly all over the country. It purports to be a form of THC that actually gets you high, and it does. The problem is that it is basically being made in meth labs, and it is being made by taking CBD that has no place to go in the market and is sitting on manufacturers' shelves, and you put some household chemicals on it and you try and convert it into Delta-8 THC outside the purview of FDA-registered facilities. God, could we only imagine what would have happened here? Old man shouts at clouds. So where does this leave consumers? FDA inaction on cannabinoids is not unique. It is emblematic of a larger disinterest in the agency in actually policing consumer safety. How did we get here? How did we lose our way? When we accept that consumer safety and pharmaceutical incentives are mutually exclusive, we are doomed to fail. The FDA and Congress did this to us. And not to put too fine a point on it, but incentives matter. When 50% of your budget comes from prescription drug user fees, you're going to be care more about that than about consumer safety. This is where FDA obviously cares at this point. And I know that they don't care because I can ask the questions of how would FDA behave if they did care? How would you behave if you prioritize consumer safety? Well, one thing is you might ask your boss, the Health and Human Services Secretary Becerra, to promulgate a rule removing CBD and other hemp-derived cannabinoids from the exclusionary provisions of FDCA. This is fully within their authority. Instead, FDA has leaned further into the regulation development of cannabinoid therapeutics to the exclusion of consumer product guidance. If I cared about consumer safety, I would promulgate draft guidance for consumer CBD product manufacturers covering analytical standards, product standards, and good manufacturing practices, especially traceability. Instead, FDA has continued to study the problem, despite having ample information to craft guidance and make the world safer, given the existence of these products that FDA refuses to recall. And if Secretary Becerra refused to promulgate a rule, FDA could lobby Congress. And if FDA leadership actually cared about consumers, they would lobby Congress to enact statutes and give them the budget and authority they feel they need to oversee the consumer CBD market. Instead, FDA has lobbied Congress to stay out of the way and let them continue approving therapeutics. What about enforcement? If FDA believed CBD represented an imminent danger to consumer safety, it would not only have the right, it has the obligation to use its recall seizure authority to remove consumer CBD products from the market. Instead, FDA has taken the lowest of all possible paths. It has limited itself to warning letters to small companies committing egregious offenses. It has not touched the larger players. It has not actually made any systematic effort to police the quality in the space or end the space. If FDA did not believe that CBD represented an imminent danger and it cared about consumer safety, it would seek to improve the quality and safety of products in the marketplace by imposing labeling standards and inspecting CBD facilities for compliance. Instead, FDA has done none of that. It's made no meaningful effort to protect consumers from fraudulent cannabinoid products, and warning letters don't count. I'm sick of this game where people who actually have power pretend like they're observers to their own power. If FDA wanted to stop this, they have all the authority they need to stop it. They know they can't and they are not trying to make it safer. How would the FDA behave on the research front if it prioritized consumer safety? Well, if it believed that there were knowledge gaps holding it back from writing useful policy on products used by tens of millions of consumers daily, and I'm not just talking about CBD here, I'm also talking about all cannabinoids in state legal markets, it would define the design of experiments it wanted to see to prove or disprove its concerns. It would fund the research it wanted to see, or it would perform the research itself. Instead, FDA has willfully ignored research not performed according to policy, which effectively ignores research not performed in the context of cannabinoid therapeutics. If FDA believed in the importance of real-world data, the term that I keep hearing them talk about, to support sound policymaking, it would create standards of identity for those products, and then it would enforce those standards reliably. How can you have real-world data if you don't have data integrity? Instead, FDA has not. I like to make the point that consumer safety requires both clear regulation and reliable enforcement. But FDA has no interest in either, at least when it comes to consumer products. From the regulation side, FDA seems to believe that it cannot regulate CBD as a food or supplement due to the existing FDCA provisions and Epidiolex's pre-existing approval. Fair enough. At the same time, it's also made no effort to remove CBD from these exclusions, even though that same statute which restricts CBD use also provides for such removal. If I'm just looking at these actions, it's impossible to conclude anything else than FDA does not think regulating consumer CBD products is a priority, or not Delta 8, or Delta 10, or THC, or any of the other cannabinoids. Same goes for enforcement. FDA has issued 80 warning letters in the last 5 years for consumer products containing CBD, many of those around COVID-19, or companies that failed to adequately control their manufacturing processes. They have not sought to seize or recall CBD products. They have not sought to enjoin any companies from marketing those products. So if we're just looking at the actions, it's pretty clear enforcing against consumer CBD products is also not a priority for FDA. So the bottom line here is FDA is not working to protect CBD consumers or oversee CBD brands. You, as a consumer and as a brand, are on your own here. So where do we go? Well, there are legislative paths to start. And I say you break it, you buy it, because Congress broke this system. They were the ones who legalized production without directing that FDA also legalize the consumer applications. If you have supply, you better regulate what's offered to consumers. HR 841 is on the docket. That puts CBD into the supplement category. It's a successor bill to HR 8179 from last Congress, and it would put hemp and hemp-derived cannabinoids, remove them from the exclusionary provisions, and force FDA to regulate them as supplements the same as they do every other supplement, which they do ineffectively, and I wish they would do better. The other option, and this is one that doesn't get enough attention, the Cannabis Administration and Opportunity Act, marijuana legalization. So, of the many people on the call, raise your hand if you think it's politically tenable for our nation's premier public health regulator to ignore its oversight function for marijuana and the $40 billion of marijuana goods in a federally regulated, federally legal environment just because THC was approved as a drug in 1986. That is the precedent FDA has set with Epidiolex, and it is the precedent they will have to follow with THC as well. This is insane. There is no two ways about it. CBD is a cannabinoid. Cannabis plants produce cannabinoids. Hemp and marijuana are versions of cannabis plants. They all can produce any cannabinoid if you crossbreed them long enough. Cannabinoids are and will remain widely available. The FDA has no authority or power to remove cannabinoids or cannabis products from the market. That is in the province of states, the DEA, basically everybody else. So they are just not dealing with the world as it is today. The CAOA does try and fail to thread the needle between hemp and marijuana-derived CBD. It's important to bear out, there's no distinction chemically between these two things. That is CBD from cannabis sativa plants. They are chemically the same. It's really weird to write a law that can't actually be audited. Marijuana legalization will flood the market, and already has flooded the market, with cannabinoids that will be chemically identical to those FDA would reserve exclusively for pharma. So put extraordinary unending pressure on FDA and Congress to address the consumer safety issues created by the exclusionary clauses. This cannot be an either or. Just because we regulate child seats doesn't mean we can't regulate seatbelts. We can do two things at once. We can regulate products that are in as consumers find them in commerce, and we can regulate products as insurers and payers would like to reimburse for them in the context of drugs and doctors. There are also executive paths forward. FDA may not wanna, but they are a executive branch agency, so the executive can make them. Current leadership at FDA could wake up tomorrow and decide that there's more to being a public health organization than approving new drugs, and then promulgate enforcement guidance for CBD and all cannabinoid consumer products so that they are produced safely, with standards, with analytical guidance, and presented to consumers with honesty. Future FDA leadership, if ever confirmed, could decide to prioritize consumer safety over new drug approvals and promulgate enforcement guidance, same thing. What about Health and Human Services? Secretary Becerra, and I'll say former California AG Secretary Becerra, could promulgate a rule accepting CBD and ideally all phytocannabinoids from the exclusionary clauses. This would be in line with his work as California's AG, where he spoke openly about the need to regulate consumer markets rather than rest on ineffective and counterproductive prohibition, which is FDA's effective stance right now. And then there's the president. President Biden could direct any of the above actions. He could also fill FDA leadership with public health consumer safety advocates and let policy emanate from personnel. But to be clear, these are all long shots. President Biden has to date not demonstrated meaningful interest in this issue, as really few have. So let's wrap it all together. If you're an honest brand, I could tell you what the law says, and it's insane. But I'd rather talk to you right now about how the FDA is actually acting. This is legal realism, all right? If you want to participate in this market, the FDA is not enforcing in this market, so you can participate, but you're going to be dealing with a lot of problems. So let's talk about those problems. The best way to avoid them. First, let your technical team lead development. The lack of oversight from FDA has allowed charlatans and charlatanism to flood this market. In 2019, too many failed CBD product developments originated from business leads with fear of missing out. Don't get enamored by silver bullets that don't exist. We saw this happen ourselves with a large publicly traded CPG that was dedicated to the idea of launching CBD, but their lawyers kept telling them, no, it has to be broad spectrum. And they were going to vendors who were saying, oh, of course I can get you a targeted broad spectrum. The project died when the supply chain was not what people said it was. This is going to happen to you. Don't believe people when they tell you things. Verify everything you're told. Lack of oversight has bred a misinformed marketplace. Be prepared to deal not just with charlatans, but with many well-meaning people who've been taken in by charlatans. They've been led to believe nonsense. CBD is not magical. It is a functional lipid, just like many others. It is not a black box. If somebody can't explain to your food scientists how this works, they don't know what they're talking about, and they are lying to you. You have the competence to understand this. You just need to find a partner who's willing to talk to you. Talk with your other commercial partners early and often. Nobody knows what's going on, and everyone is paralyzed. Prepare to have repeated discussions with your banks, your distributors, your retailers, your insurance brokers, and everyone else in the value chain. They are going to be confused. They're going to ask questions dating back to the 2014 Farm Bill. They're going to ask questions about states versus federal government. It is confusing. Be ready for that. Talk to your trade associations. The only paths forward today are through legislative executive action. The best way to get that action is to amplify your voice. The Consumer Brands Association has been doing great work on this front. I am really grateful for their work, especially around consumer uncertainty and consumer confusion. I'm a big advocate that when you're launching new markets, or when new markets are launching, the first thing the federal government should look at is consumer safety and consumer standards of identity. Make sure the data is good, make sure that you're policing what people can sell, and then actually police that. That's what trade associations can help push. And then launch. CBD is a tangle of uncertainty. The only way out is through. If you're waiting for definitive answers to questions in CBD, you're unlikely to get them and unlikely to launch and likely to just waste time and money for your whole team. Put it out there. As long as you are not making claims around health and drugs, and you are not doing things according to your normal process, I promise you, you are at the bottom of the regulatory stack. You are the ones who are doing things right. That is the least of the concern. And then don't believe any word any CBD vendor tells you. Charlatans and charlatanism. And then this one I'm really annoyed with. Don't bother filing for trademarks. Rely on first in use. The USPTO's hands are tied by FDA. If it's not a pharmaceutical, they're not going to register the mark unless you lie and say that it only comes from naturally occurring CBD from seeds and stalks. And I really don't advise lying. And now for fun, here's some quote advice for dishonest brands. And this is based entirely on observations of FDA to date. So what should you do if you're a dishonest brand? Go ahead and lie about your product. Acceptable practices appear to include labeling content inaccurately, labeling content incompletely, obscuring product content, falsifying your C of A's, shopping for lab results, claiming specific effects in specific timeframes. There have been no enforcement actions that have cited any of these. So please, if you're dishonest and understand that people will buy what you say and that people don't have the tools available to judge whether you're lying, it's open season for you, bud. Manufacture however you like. Acceptable practices appear to include not registering with FDA, not following GMPs or CGMPs, not maintaining traceability records, not using food-safe equipment, not controlling for foodborne illness, and accepting intermediate goods with significant residual solvents. Go right ahead. Nobody's going to call you on it. FDA is not going to visit. They don't take authority or responsibility for this. And then go ahead and claim pretty much anything short of the ability to cure cancer. Acceptable practices appear to include making absorption or effect claims based on mouse models, making absorption or effect claims based on anecdotal evidence, making absorption or effect claims based on nothing. This is always the wonderful loophole. If you don't cite any research, then you're not lying about the research that you're not citing. Great trick. Totally plays today. And then some don'ts. Don't claim that CBD cures a disease, at least not explicitly. That's pharma territory. That's when FDA is going to get upset with you. Don't claim that you can cure or diagnose COVID-19. That'll definitely piss them off. And then also don't forget to laugh all the way to the bank. The FDA's warning letter process is obscenely slow. It is something like 6 months on average between when a violation is identified and when a warning letter is sent out. And by the time they catch you, you're getting off with a warning letter. There are no mandatory recalls. That does not seemingly exist with today's FDA. And I know this because just in this morning, I have read recall letters from FDA that are optional recall letters, or sorry, not recall letters, warning letters about somebody who's manufacturing pharmaceuticals on their leather ottoman in their house. Not shut down, not recalled, just a warning. You're missing manufacturing controls. Great, effective regulating. So you've heard me carp about this. Why bother with this industry? And I swear to God, despite my anger, the juice is worth the squeeze. Not every condition is a disease. CBD and other cannabinoids are legal to produce and widely available, and they are beneficial for a wide variety of conditions that everyday consumers would like to use them for in amounts that don't rise to the need to have a doctor overseeing. Things that we've investigated them for. Cravings for opioids. Geez, could you imagine if one of the solutions to the opioid crisis was more tightly restricted than the opioids themselves? We've also seen it with oral ulcers. We've seen benefits, a study recently, just last month, about hair regrowth. These are all with relatively low levels for most of these. And then there's another 808 studies and counting registered on clinicaltrials.gov for CBD alone. And then there's the rest of the cannabinoids. I promise you, THC and CBD are not the only ones. There's a reason why CBD can be converted into other bioactives. Cannabinoids are bioactive. They are what we have wanted supplements to be. They are safe and they are useful. This is the future of functional ingredients. Cannabinoid consumer products are the bioactive opportunity of our lifetimes. FDA can keep good players off the field, but they can't clear the field. And this is why FDA is behaving so irresponsibly, is because regulated or not, the game is going on. You can either write regulations to make it safer, or you can watch people tear each other apart. And with that, I'm going to let a breath out and take a glass of water and answer any questions. that you might have.
Thank you. This is a lot of information here, and I just want to let the audience know that the PDF will be uploaded to the resources section of this webinar, and it will be available for download immediately after the webinar. So Justin, I guess one question here we have in the Q&A is, have you been in front of any of the big box players to hear their concerns for any form of CBD, be it an OTC specific or RX driven SKU?
So depends what you mean by big box, and I think that assumes a level of understanding amongst those players that isn't actually present in evidence. Most of them, they look to investigate and then they talk to their counsel, and their counsel says, don't even bother. And so that, a lot of them are coloring outside the lines when they talk to people like us and they're going independently. The people within these firms are interested, but I understand where they're coming from. Their product liability insurance is quite expensive, and their insurers, there's not a lot of appetite in the insurance marketplace to eat this type of risk right now.
And that would be across the board from Target to Kroger's to Costco or anyone you'd say, right?
Yes, some are more open to it than others. I think it depends on the firm, and it depends on a lot of factors. Depends on who is in charge, who is the counsel. I know some big box brands, like CBD, is locked up in a safe in the general counsel's office. That is a real thing from one of the largest food manufacturers on earth. They don't know what they're doing right now, and honestly, they don't have to. They're doing all sorts of other things. Until you get the ability to market these products, they're not going to be a significant category. That's one of the biggest problems.
Okay. So I touched base with you on this one before we started. How does California's AB 45 impact the use of CBD in food products? And do you think the FDA will challenge products launched in compliance with AB 45?
I mean, FDA might. I would never put it past FDA to cut off their nose to spite their face. I don't think AB 45 practically does anything because, again, I don't think that insurers care what California state does. I think insurers care what FDA, who has exclusive jurisdiction over interstate into food sold in interstate commerce, will say. And the way the Commerce Clause has been read for generations, that even includes products that are wholly produced intrastate, because that bottle might have come from out of state, or the consumer might look at it from out of state. So if you're selling CBD at a farmer's market in California, I think that you probably can feel a little more comfortable today. But if you're an average consumer, California's action really does nothing.
Okay. Why isn't there more pharmacokinetic research on CBD?
In general, I think that it's easier to make money by just saying things right now. I face this issue all the time. We have had discussions about this at the board level. As CEO, I've authorized research budgets that don't necessarily directly transfer into or translate into near-term revenue because other people could just go out and say things. I think we are fortunate to have long-term oriented investors and a belief that consumer safety should lead. And so we invest in this stuff also because we want to know. We don't want to be lying. We don't want to just say things because people buy it. It's very easy to look at the cannabinoid category and be like, ooh, everybody wants a sleep product, so why don't I just slap the word sleep on top of CBD and sell it? It's a lot more difficult to act and requires a degree of integrity to go out and say, I think CBD and sleep could be useful. Maybe I should go and research this. But then you have to come up with that question of okay, I could go spend 6 figures on research to verify whether CBD actually helps with sleep, or I could just go out and say CBD helps with sleep and sell a bunch of product and spend that money on marketing instead, and nobody's going to stop me. I don't think it's a surprise that many people do the opposite. Industry self-regulation is not a thing. I don't know how people started thinking it was a thing, but it's nonsense. You only regulate what you enforce. It's not like if you put 22 people on a field, they'll suddenly break out in an NFL quality football game. You need referees.
That's a good point. And so is that, I mean, the question is, why hasn't research been completed on the effects and impacts of CBD on things like inflammation, sleep, anxiety, which we think people are using this for, but that's, I mean, pretty much just because people can do what they want.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. Like, it's hard to get funding for research. Like, if you're, most of the universities we talk to, like, they can't get federal funding for this research if they're not doing it in a therapeutic context. So, like, they've got to go to private companies, and many CBD companies make more money by not doing research than they would by doing research. Like, why would you want to know that you are lying when you have free reign to go out and sell things as long as you remain ignorant? It's a tough set of incentives.
And so, well, and what do you think the future looks like then for minor cannabinoids like CBN, CBG? We're starting to see those more on products.
Oh, minor cannabinoids scare the hell out of me. Not that because I don't believe in them. I do. Like, I think they are generally very safe. What I would like to see is I'd like to see the FDA come up with a clear process and a clear design of experiments for qualifying minor cannabinoids and understanding the risk profiles associated with them. And I'd like to see FDA go out and do that research as soon as humanly possible so that they can make a risk-based assessment or a toxicology-based assessment of cannabinoids and know what's going on in the marketplace. Because again, they can't control what's in the marketplace. It's all being put in there, whether it's from state level marijuana or whether it's from national CBD. So the best they can do is try and understand it. And then I'd like to see them come up with coherent rules around, given this risk profile, this is how we're going to police it. Given this risk profile, this is how we're going to police it. I was looking last night at a presentation I gave to FDA 2 years ago in a listening session. And one of the first things I had in there, and one of the first and last things, was if you don't come up with stopgap regulations, people are going to find ways to use the hemp derivatives that they can sell. And today you're seeing exactly that with Delta 8. That is inventory that's sitting on shelf and can't be sold legally. So, but people do see that, hey, if I just convert this into Delta 8, I can sell that anywhere. And like, I wouldn't be surprised, by the way, if a lot of that Delta 8 is actually Delta 9. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of that was coming out of the marijuana industry. If, like, you can't distinguish between these things. You have to start with public health and consumer safety.
So this is from Courtney Coate. You know, do you feel observational studies can be beneficial in addition to PK studies?
Absolutely. There is time and space for all of the studies. I think observational, you're running into some issues. Like, we like to focus on the things that we can observe analytically. And the reason why is because we can actually run those studies and get statistically significant results with a fairly smaller sample size. If you are not like having to control for sample bias or reporting bias or subjectivity bias, you can get very robust results. This is the beauty of biostatistics versus statistics for political polling. Like, you can do different things based on the content or the integrity of the data that you're looking at. So I think observational studies, like, it depends on what the endpoints are. It depends on the design of experiments, but there's certainly a place for them. Absolutely. I just think that the prerequisite is really the PK data, because if I don't know what's actually in their bloodstream, then how can I correlate what they feel with the presence of the CBD? Just because, like, I consume 800 milligrams in a tincture doesn't indicate anything about the level that's actually going to show up in the blood for that person. So there are people for whom they would probably excrete that whole dose. There are other people who would have wonderful absorption of it. So I think you have to be monitoring the CBD levels in the bloodstream at the same time as you are asking people for their subjective interpretations of how they feel. Because otherwise you're just really, placebo can run wild. Okay.
Are a lot of companies starting the innovation and formulation process behind the scenes then?
I think so depends what you mean by a lot, but I think a significant number are, and I think we are very happy to see people who recognize that by starting this now doesn't mean they're launching it tomorrow. In fact, they have no plans to launch tomorrow, but they do believe in the category, and they believe that when the category unlocks, they don't want to be rushing to catch up. They would rather be the first off the line and doing it in a way that wasn't scaring the hell out of them that their product is going to turn pink from oxidation because they failed to do the appropriate shelf life studies, which can't be done in an accelerated manner because we don't have enough data to actually put models together for that. Like, You have to just put things on shelf in real world conditions and see what happens, so you can build up those prop models, so you can develop those accelerated models. But you got to do it all the hard work first. So we have seen some forward-looking companies, some of the larger manufacturers in various categories, whether it's juices, teas, other types of healthy snacks, RTD beverages. They are getting into this and they are really interested in it, but they want to do it right. They're not interested in risking their brands on a fad. They believe in the efficacy and the power of this, but they also believe that there's no point in putting out a product that isn't consistent and of the same quality piece as the rest of their brand, and that takes work.
Okay. So if the comment is, my company won't budge on anything having to do with CBD right now, how can I start to guide or educate them?
That's a great question. I think the first thing is don't BS them. Like there is risk here. This is like, I think it's important to understand that there is no like legal argument that solves this problem. There is no clever lawyering. There is no clever wording. You've got to engage with the truth issue head on. And I think for brands that engage with FDA on the other side, especially on pharmaceuticals, like it's probably not worth it for them. You're not going to get them involved here. They've got other lines of business that are worth more to them. I think though, if you've got a company that's open to it, but just a little scared, start with the facts. Show them PK studies. Show them the clinical research that we have done. Show them the market research from CBA. Show them the market research from BDS, from any of the really good research houses. These are products that people want, and they are for uses that people are buying for. I mean, when you step back from it for a second, CBD and THC cannabinoids, like these are the most widely used bioactives on earth behind caffeine. Already, they're just unregulated. So you have no demand risk in this market. It's all about regulatory risk. So like, I think the question starts from like, do you think these products are good? If you've got an allergy to anything that has been labeled any illegal drug, it's going to be hard to get over that. Although I've got an uncle who often asks me, makes fun of me for being in the marijuana hemp industry. And my response is always, how's your wine cellar doing?
So I guess one last question here. You mentioned the research. Can any CBD brand leverage the results from the pharmacokinetic research that Caliper did?
I would not recommend that. I think like you can certainly take certain parts of it, but one piece that came out of our research with CBD was that water soluble wasn't a monolith. And neither was nanoparticles. We tested 3 different formulations of ingredients, 3 different ingredient chassis, and they came back with 3 different pharmacokinetic profiles and significantly different pharmacokinetic profiles. And it turned out that like the best performing one was not the smallest particle. So you can't just go on particle size and say like, hey, look, I think you could probably say water soluble is better than oil soluble, but that's the limit of the claims that I would lift off this. Everything else, you got to go do your own research because we just don't know what is general yet versus what is specific.
Okay. We did have actually one other question that I don't know if you'll have the answer for, but what was the last plant-based ingredient denied by the FDA?
It's a good trivia question.
I know, right?
Kratom, maybe? I mean, that's fair. That's pretty recent. There are lots. Most active ingredients turn out to be plant-based. Like acetaminophen is actually technically plant-based. Like this has been a historical thing. So I think from a food perspective, we've just put ourselves in this blind corner where we developed policy that was designed for synthesized molecules, and then we let it apply to things that are widely available. And that was a real problem. Again,
thank you, Justin. And the PDF, again, will be uploaded to the resources section of this webinar. And this will be available immediately after we sign off. Before we sign off, I'd like to thank Justin for your presentation and Caliper Ingredients for your support in providing this informative content. And I'd like to remind everyone that the webcast on-demand version will be available on naturalproductsinsider.com within the next 48 hours. And it will be available for 1 year. and we will be sending a link to the archive to all registrants. So thanks everyone for attending, and have a wonderful remainder of your day.
Thank you.